Welcome back. Now, the Competition Commission has released a provisional report on the media and digital platforms market inquiry it initiated in 2023. The inquiry was established to ascertain the impact of digital platforms on news media as far as the distribution and monetization of media content is concerned. The watchdog has identified anti-competitive behaviour and has recommended that tech giants pay local news media houses up to 500 million rand annually for 3 to 5 years. Noluthando Jokazi, the CompCom's technical lead in the media and digital platforms market inquiry, joins us with greater perspective on this. Noluthando, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. So a shift in the media landscape when it comes to advertising revenue, especially with the rise of these digital platforms. As we get started, just unpack some of these findings for us.
Yeah, certainly. So the report highlights a major shift in advertising revenue from traditional media such as newspapers and broadcasters to digital platforms like Google and Meta. And these tech giants now dominate the market, benefiting massively from for massive reach, data-driven advertising, and control over the key online spaces. And so one of the key concerns is the imbalances in bargaining power. We see that news publishers who invest in quality journalism struggle to negotiate fair compensation for the value and the content that they create for these platforms, while Google and Meta or X earn significant revenue from news-related searches. And so we've tried to address some of these issues in terms of the findings. And so part of the findings is that we're seeing that a lot of the search queries run between 10 to 15% on Google search. A lot of South African consumers consume news on social media.
Yes.
And they find it on social media platforms. And it's really difficult for news outlets who don't receive traffic and eyeballs on their platforms to monetize this consumer engagement. And so the key findings is that we're trying to assess whether there should be a shift in compensation, as you mentioned, and there should be a shift in traffic and eyeballs to news organizations and news sites. And yeah, so those are the findings.
Before we get to the remedies, you mentioned something important there, and you said that most people look to social media platforms and these search engines for news. What does this then do for misinformation, disinformation, and fake news at large?
Yeah, it obviously exacerbates the idea of fake news and fake information. We've seen that for the past couple of years, how misinformation has been exacerbated on social media platforms. And part of the findings that we highlight in the report is that social media has promoted sensationalist and misinformation at the expense of credible news. And so we do make remedies in the report to highlight these findings and to make provisional remedies on how ad tech or at least digital platforms must be accountable for some of this misinformation because of the costs that we see with journalists and news publications, which they need to vet some of the information, which platforms don't do that. And so we're calling for some of those remedies in terms of misinformation as well.
And just walk us through some of the other remedies. I mean, we just mentioned the compensation of around 300 to 500 million rand for the next 3 to 5 years by big tech giants.
That's correct. So there's obviously long-term and short-term solutions or remedies that we've incorporated in the report. In the short term, we are calling for fairer compensation from Google around 3 to 500 million over the next 3 to 5 years. But in the long term, we're also calling for greater transparency in terms of digital advertising. We understand that publishers get very little in terms of data and consumer data in order for them to monetize some of the eyeballs that go onto their platforms platforms or go onto their websites. And so we're calling for clearer reports and clearer data on some of these earnings for publishers as themselves. We're also calling for targeted support for media diversity. You would have seen that some of this, in our scope, in the terms of reference, we do look to the plurality and the diversity of news, and we've included the South African Broadcasting Commission, and we also included the SABC as well. So we want them to have some of the funding mechanisms to ensure that local and community publishers get a fairer share of digital advertising in the market. We're also calling that tech giants need to deprioritize some of their biases on the platform. So, for example, Google will bias foreign media over local media, as well as the visibility of local and community newspapers or community media on the platform. So we're calling for greater transparency in terms of algorithms, and to ensure that they prioritize local South African media over foreign media. And so this is kind of a regulatory oversight, which we will be engaging with the platforms themselves, as well as news media in terms of how to roll out some of these remedies.
And you talk about engaging with those digital media platforms. Just how, I know you released the report yesterday, but what has the response been like? And are there measures in place to implement if these digital media platforms don't necessarily come to the table and move forward with some of the recommendations?
Sure. So, like you said, the report only came out yesterday, and we're giving stakeholders 6 weeks to engage with the report. It is quite a complex report. And it has many annexures, and because it's evidence-based, it's pretty dense. So we are allowing stakeholders to engage on the report and to understand the report itself. But also, in terms of just regulatory oversight and compliance, in terms of complying, the Competition Act gives us powers to regulate the behavior of global tech firms. And honestly, this is not the first time we've regulated, we've negotiated or engaged with big tech firms. You would have known we've had a previous inquiry, the online intermediation market inquiry, in which we did engage with Google, and we've had agreements with Google themselves. We've also had agreements with Booking.com. So really in this report, we try to find solutions where it's a win-win situation or win-win solution, because we see that there is interdependence between the value that news provides for digital platforms, as well as the massive reach that digital platforms provide for local newspapers. So we want to have a win-win solution where we don't have a situation where Meta cuts off news, for example. And so we know that, if engaging with these platforms, we will find sustainable long-term solutions, but also it's in their best interest to engage us. And South Africa is a big economy. It's in the best interest to be part of this economy. We don't anticipate a pullout from Google, but we do know that we will have that opportunity to engage with them. And so we understand they will find resolutions, as we did in the previous inquiry as well.
Noluthando, thanks so much for joining us and just sharing some insights from the report. That was the CompCom's technical lead in the media and digital platforms market inquiry, Noluthando Jokazi.